This is Vince with all the restoration videos. Today we're working on this project on a Porsche. It seems the rear hood on this car, you know, the one that covers the motor here, doesn't want to go up. So upon a little bit of investigation, I see that this big wing up here was added on at a later time. Alright? And probably so was this air condenser that's up here. So we're talking about a lot of extra weight. No wonder this thing wouldn't go up. It still only has one strut in the back here. Now with this much weight, it should actually have two struts. So I'm going to install a dual strut system on this to give it more power to hold this thing up. And the other problem is a little trunk spring retainer, I guess they call it. I don't know. Believe it or not, this piece costs $182 now if you go to buy one. But now this thing comes all apart. This was all loaded with grease and crud and everything, and I wire brushed it. I cleaned it with some paint thinner and got all the grease off it, and I'm down pretty much to bare metal. But I'm still going to put it on my glass beater back here and clean it up yet a little more. Alright, now since this is supposed to be some kind of a restoration here a little bit, you can't just leave it like this or paint it black or something. You've got to make it look like this was CAD plated with the yellow chromate dye on it. Alright, so what we're going to do is after we glass bead this thing, we're just going to shoot it with this gold metallic paint. Now if you want to make it look a little more natural, you can get some silver paint and stand way back, alright, and just spray a little bit on there on each side, and this way you'll have some more of the silver coming up through. Alright, but now to get back to this problem here is a pretty simple fix. Since we want to make this spring at least have twice the power that it normally had, we're going to have to add another spring. I mean, it's common sense, right? We added more weight to this trunk, so we have to add another spring to our retainer. I got the idea from valve springs. A lot of valve springs, they have 2 valve springs. Some of them even have 3. So I have this spring I found laying around. This will fit right in the center like so. The only thing is though, there's no plating on it at all. So, well, it has like a nickel plating on it, but that's not enough. That would rust in a heartbeat. So we're going to paint this spring too before we put it back on and coat it with clear. And this thing we're going to glass bead, and we're going to put that back on. So now we have at least double the amount of strength that we had before. And of course I'm going to paint this gold too. Little highlights of silver and along with this. And we're going to install it back up here, and hopefully that should do the trick. Okay gents, I'm going to paint this thing up and then we'll see where we're at. Now the first thing we have to do is coat this stuff with some Rust-Oleum rusty metal primer. Of course this stuff would really lock your paint in. Whereas if you were just to put the gold on it now, it would have a hard time sticking and probably peeling off. Primer really has a good grip on everything. I covered the threads on my bolts so I don't have to run a tap over them to get all the paint out of the threads. Without a glass beater, you'd have a really hard time cleaning all the rust and corrosion out of the original spring, not to mention inside tight areas. So if you're a serious person about doing restoration, one of the first things I would get would be a glass beater. Harbor Freight has them pretty cheap. You want to make sure you shoot everything at 4 different angles. And don't forget the screws you're going to have to turn over a little bit too. Now back to the old Porsche problem again. We have the latch adjusted so when you pull it, the hood will actually pop up. Alright, and I merely did that by tightening the screw that's on this latch in a little more. Alright, now in your case it might be you have to come out a little bit, but you got to play with it till you get that right point. Alright, now put an extra booster spring in here like I told you before. That helped to pop it up a little more bit. Alright, because of all the extra weight. The added weight on here is the extra wing I have on the back. And I have this big AC condenser under here. Now that normally wasn't on this car, it was just a regular hood. So naturally the one strut on there isn't going to work. So what you need, actually to make this thing work, is a dual strut. Alright. Now, what I have to do is take the single strut out and put the dual strut in. Now that seems like a pretty simple project. Now on this one we have little tiny clips on a stud that comes in and out. So we're going to try to remove that and just replace that little bolt with the little stud with the little clip that goes on and with these bolts that are on here. Now I got spacers in here too. And we're going to see what we actually use and what we don't. I got 3 on the bottom and 3 on the top. But I notice on our hinge here we have about a 1/2 inch diameter. Now the reason I put these spacers in here was to keep these two pieces separate. Okay, now if we have that much space on there and we have one strut on the inside of that opening, and then we're going to put another strut on the outside. Then we're going to put our bolt through here. Okay, now that should be a pretty simple solution to this problem. The only thing is, this is like microsurgery on a Porsche. Because, I mean, it's hard to see anything on this car. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to take this, it looks like a heater hose, off. Now there's a bolt back here, a little clamp on it that seems to be holding down this heater hose. So I think once we take that bolt off, the heater hose should come out and should give us a little more access to that strut that's back there holding this thing on. Alright, actually I have this old golf club over here that's holding this hood up now. Alright, as long as I don't hit it with my head, we're going to be alright. So I'm going to go ahead and take that one bolt out and remove that hose to give us a little more access. And then I'm going to zoom the camera in so you can actually see what I'm doing. And hopefully, after I get the 2 struts on, I'll be able to pull the hood and the hood will just come right up. Now you pull it and it just sits here. Well, it comes up about a 1/2 inch. And it didn't even do that before. It just sat there and wouldn't come up at all. And somebody had to hold the lever back while somebody picked up the back. Alright, that's not a good thing. So now, let me go ahead and take care of that and we'll continue this in a second. Now I have taken this bolt out, and if I just push this down, I should get access to this strut. Now, all I have to do is get out these 2 clips, one way in the back, which should be interesting. I might have to use a needle nose pliers to get that one out. That's going to be a trick. So I'm going to go ahead and get this strut out of here. And we'll have to see how we can set up the dual struts. Now, I tapped the front stud in about, I don't know, 1/4 inch past flush, I guess. And this is real tight. So I have a vice grip now attached to it. I'm going to try to pull it down this way and try to pop it out. Not that I really need to save this thing, but I'm just tired of losing parts all the time. You know what I mean? You guys hear what I'm saying? Alright. That thing is really in there. I'm going to have to get a little stud or something and hit it from the other side. I got it down. I was having a lot of problems, but the big problem I think was the hood wasn't up to its most highest point and my strut was still under pressure. So when I was trying to get this pin out, it was actually cocking because of all the pressure on the strut. It still has some juice left, but it just really couldn't compete with the weight of this trunk. Alright, and for a standard hood, I'm sure this thing would work great, but not with all this extra weight on it. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get that last bolt out back there, that last stud. That shouldn't be too hard. I already got the pin out, the clip that holds it in, so I should just be able to push that right out. Way in the back here. You see what I'm talking about? Right in there. Now when I was taking that pin out on the other strut, something fell out. I don't know what it was, but since there's a lot of space in there, I'm thinking it was a spacer like this. So we're going to need a spacer on the first one. Then that's going to go in that little Y groove we have there. And then this other one is going to go on the outside of our bracket. So they're going to both be together. The trouble is trying to hold this together while the other one comes in. I'm going to have to put a bolt through the other side, or maybe even this pin. Put the pin in through the back side to hold that together, and then when the bolt comes through, it will push this pin out and it'll come all the way through. I hope you follow me on that one. You can see now I have the one strut just hanging in here. I have it mounted in the bracket already, well, in between the two little bracket fingers. And I have this one mounted in between the little bracket fingers too. I also have a spacer in here. Alright, now this is the original pin. Now the idea is to put the other strut on with the bolt in and push this through, and as it goes through, the bolt will be able to pass through that washer. Don't forget, I'm also going to have a washer on the other one, I think. I'm going to line it up now and see how it looks. Okay, I just checked it out. I got to have a spacer on here. Alright, I got to have a spacer on here. Because if you don't put a little spacer on here, the two sides are going to touch each other and not allow the end to go over this piece here. Okay, so you got to have a spacer on there, and there's another spacer right on the inside. So I'm going to see if I can get that bolt to line up and push this one out and come all the way through the other side without losing the position of this spacer that's under here. See, this is what I'm talking about. Here's my little spacer right here. Without that spacer, it won't work. It would have been nice if they would have gave me directions. Well, good news, it worked. Now all I have to do is put a little locking bolt on the other side with a little washer behind it, and I should be in Fat City, pretty much. But now you notice way in the back, I still got the ends. Alright, I'm going to have to put one washer in there at least on the outside of that bracket, so these two cylinders don't touch each other, or we're going to have a problem. Let me go ahead and get the bolt on this side first, the nut. Now I'm not going to tighten this all the way down. because I need a little bit of free play down there at the end, if you know what I'm talking about, to get all of that stuff lined up. Now if you look back there, you can see where I'm pushing the bolt on the right to go all the way through and push out the pin that's just holding it on the left. And if I can get that pin to come out, by the time the pin comes out, hopefully that bolt will be right behind it. We'll see. Gotta push on a little more. I'm holding up the trunk as in the highest position it can go and working it up and down just a little bit as I'm pushing. Now you'll notice I did get the bolt on. Not after though beating on it for about 30 seconds and bending it out and then having to squeeze it back together with a vice grip, but I managed to get it on by working the hood up as high as you could go and keep moving the bolt around. Eventually it came through. So now all I got to do is tighten them up. Now I back up here. Lo and behold, the hood is staying up by itself. That's a good sign. Now I got it on. Everything works great. If it wasn't for this wobble joint extension for holding that nut, well, the bolt in the back up against the wall, I wouldn't have been able to do it. As it was, I could only do like a 1/8 turn at a time. It took me a half hour to tighten that bolt down. But as you can see, the lid is standing up by itself. No more golf club underneath. Now, I watched it. I got nervous when I hooked up my hose here. And then when I watched it as I closed the trunk, and it stays in that same position that it's in when it closes. So I'm in like Flynn. That's it. This is Vince, AutoRestorationVideos.com. Sometimes you gotta hang in there. You gotta do what it takes. Check out my website, www.autorestorationvideos.com. See what kind of gripes I have and what latest projects I'm working on. This is one of them.